They humiliated him, cuffing his hands for simply sitting on a park bench with a notebook. The racist officers laughed, unaware their victim would soon become their chief. What happened next shook the entire city. But let's start from the beginning. The sun drenched the park in golden light, illuminating well-kept paths and casting soft shadows from rows of manicured trees. Laughter from children and the rustle of leaves created a serene backdrop as Jordan Lewis, a 45-year-old black man with a thoughtful expression, walked leisurely, dressed in a crisp blue shirt and dark slacks. In his hand, he carried a worn leather journal, its pages filled with reflections on equity and justice, his lifelong passion as a former law professor. Finding a shaded bench, Jordan sat, opened his journal, and let the calm inspire his thoughts. Across the street, a patrol car idled with Sergeant Mitchell and Officer Clark inside. Mitchell, a gruff veteran in his late 40s with a permanent scowl, tapped the steering wheel impatiently. Spotting Jordan on the bench, he narrowed his eyes. "What's he doing here?" he muttered. Clark, younger and less hardened, shifted uneasily. "Just sitting," he replied softly. Mitchell smirked. "Doesn't look like he belongs. Let's check him out." The two officers approached, boots crunching on the gravel. Jordan glanced up as they neared, his expression composed. Mitchell spoke first, his tone curt. "Afternoon. What are you doing here?" Jordan closed his journal, meeting Mitchell's gaze calmly. "Good afternoon, officers. I'm just writing and enjoying the park." "Got ID?" Mitchell demanded. Jordan nodded, retrieving his license without hesitation, handing it over with steady hands. Mitchell scanned the ID, his suspicion unfading. "Gotten any complaints?" Jordan asked evenly. Mitchell ignored the question, his tone hardening. "We'll ask the questions. Why'd you pick this park?" Jordan, unflustered, replied, "It's peaceful, that's all." His composure only irritated Mitchell further. Clark fidgeted, adjusting his body cam. Mitchell's frustration mounted as Jordan's calm undermined his authority. Without warning, Mitchell barked, "Stand up, hands behind your back, loitering with intent." Jordan's brow furrowed, but he complied, maintaining his dignity as Clark reluctantly cuffed him. The faint click of the handcuffs and the recording body cam marked the start of an incident that would soon echo far beyond the park. The arrest video spread across social media like wildfire, triggering a wave of outrage. In clip after clip, Jordan Lewis's calm yet demeaning treatment by the officers resonated deeply, with hashtags calling for justice and an end to racial profiling trending within hours. Prominent activists shared the footage, labeling it a textbook case of discrimination. Protests quickly formed outside the precinct, with placards reading, "Stop the profiling," and "Justice for Jordan." News outlets picked up the story, airing debates about systemic racism in law enforcement. Jordan, however, remained silent. In his study, walls lined with books on law and civil rights, he sat under the soft glow of a desk lamp, surrounded by open legal texts and notebooks. Methodically, he worked on a detailed legal brief, cross-referencing precedent and constructing a solid case against the precinct. Family and friends inundated him with calls, urging him to give interviews or join the protests. Jordan politely declined. "There's a bigger game at play," he told his sister during one call, his tone calm but resolute. At the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Sergeant Mitchell, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, laughed loudly in the break room, dismissing the uproar as woke hysteria. "Let them scream," he scoffed, waving a coffee mug. "They'll move on to something else in a week." Officer Clark, however, couldn't shake his discomfort. The growing media attention and furious online discourse left him sleepless. Each replay of the footage reminded him of his quiet complicity. He avoided Mitchell's jokes, his guilt weighing heavier each day. The breaking point came when internal affairs arrived unannounced. The precinct's captain gathered the team, his expression grim. "The mayor's ordered an investigation into the arrest," he announced, his tone sharp. Mitchell rolled his eyes, muttering under his breath, "Here we go." Clark's face paled. As the room buzzed with murmurs, the weight of what was coming became undeniable. The precinct's culture of unchecked authority was about to face the light. Weeks later, murmurs filled the precinct as rumors of change swirled. The mayor's office announced sweeping reforms and the appointment of a new chief of police, someone handpicked to restore public trust and accountability. The announcement left many officers uneasy, but not Sergeant Mitchell. Leaning back in his chair during a briefing, he sneered. Probably some pencil pusher with no real experience. They'll be gone in 6 months. Officer Clark sat nearby, quietly observing. The growing tension at the precinct mirrored his own. He hadn't slept well since the arrest, the weight of his choices gnawing at him. Every new update about the investigation only deepened his unease. The mayor's plans felt like a storm rolling in, one he couldn't escape. The day of the introduction arrived, and the precinct's briefing room was packed. Officers stood in clusters, their low murmurs echoing against the walls. At the front of the room, the mayor stood at the podium, her presence commanding but measured. She spoke about the public's outcry, the need for transparency, and the importance of rebuilding the community's trust. This precinct, she said firmly, needs leadership that reflects accountability, fairness, and integrity. She turned toward the door. It is my honor to introduce your new chief of police, Jordan Lewis. The room froze as Jordan stepped in, his polished shoes clicking against the tile floor. He wore a tailored navy suit, his demeanor calm but commanding. His eyes scanned the room briefly, lingering on Mitchell and Clark. Mitchell's trademark smirk vanished, his face twisting into shock and anger. Clark turned pale, his stomach sinking as he averted his gaze. Jordan stood at the podium, his voice steady as he addressed the stunned crowd. "Good morning," he began, his tone calm yet resolute. "I know there are many of you who see this moment as a threat, others as an opportunity, but let me be clear. I am not here for revenge." His eyes swept the room, briefly locking with Mitchell's. "I am here to ensure that this precinct becomes a model for justice, a place where everyone, officers and citizens alike, are treated with respect." A tense silence filled the room. Mitchell shifted in his seat, his jaw tight with disbelief, while Clark slumped further into his chair. Jordan continued, outlining his plans for reform. His words carried the weight of conviction and purpose, sending a clear message. The culture of unchecked authority and bias was over. Justice was no longer just a word on the wall. It would be the standard by which they all were judged. Jordan's tenure as chief of police began with swift and decisive action. In his first weeks, he implemented implicit bias training for all officers, mandating sessions led by respected community leaders and experts in racial equity. He restructured the complaint review process, creating an independent board with citizen representatives to ensure transparency. Regular community oversight meetings brought residents into the fold, fostering trust and collaboration. Jordan's approach was clear. Accountability and inclusivity would shape the precinct's future. Among the officers, reactions were mixed. Officer Clark, weighed down by guilt, hesitated before knocking on Jordan's office door one evening. "Chief," Clark began, his voice trembling, "I want to apologize for my part in everything." Jordan studied him for a moment before nodding. "Acknowledging your role is a start," he said. "But actions will always speak louder than words. Show me you're ready to do better." Meanwhile, Sergeant Mitchell was openly defiant. He grumbled through training sessions and mocked the changes among his peers. His resentment boiled over during a public town hall, where Jordan invited residents to discuss the precinct's reforms. When a concerned citizen praised the changes, Mitchell stood, his voice dripping with derision. "This isn't leadership," he sneered. "It's pandering to people who don't understand what it takes to do this job." The room fell silent. Jordan remained composed, but addressed Mitchell directly. "Leadership is about accountability and trust, Sergeant. If you can't accept that, then perhaps you're in the wrong place." The town hall incident prompted an internal review of Mitchell's behavior, uncovering a history of misconduct and complaints swept under the rug. Under Jordan's administration, there was no room for such behavior. Mitchell was dismissed, his career ending in disgrace. As the weeks turned into months, the results of Jordan's reforms became evident. Community trust surged, with residents reporting fewer incidents of discrimination and greater confidence in the precinct. The Independent Oversight Board resolved cases with unprecedented transparency, earning public praise. Officers who had resisted the changes initially began to see the benefits of a fairer system, creating a more cohesive and motivated workforce. Jordan's leadership became a national symbol of justice and resilience, proving that change was possible even within deeply flawed systems. His story inspired others, a reminder that perseverance and integrity could dismantle prejudice and build a foundation for meaningful progress.